So John Boehner is the former Speaker of the House, and he recently gave an interview to Politico, and boy, is it telling. I mean, just the fact that you can say some of the things that he said in this article when you're free from Congress. Turns out there's a lot of freedom. Now, the article written by Tim Alberta for Politico magazine begins by pointing out how incredibly happy John Boehner is to not be in Congress anymore, especially during the reign of President Trump. Now, he writes, at 67, Boehner is liberated to say what he spent many years trying not to say, to smoke his 2 packs a day without the undue stress, to chuckle at the latest crisis in Washington, and whisper to himself those 3 magic words, not my problem. Yeah, man, hey, look, it would be nice, but seriously, in a way, it kind of is your problem. It's everybody's problem. Trump and the Republicans going further and further to the right isn't just Congress's problem anymore. But apparently he's like, you know what? I'm not in Congress anymore. I'm rich. So screw it. I don't really care. But like I said, still, he apparently has very little reservation in criticizing his former colleagues. In fact, when they talked about the news of the day, Boehner immediately decided to let go with a few F-bombs. He said, quote, Gowdy, that's my guy, even though he doesn't know how to dress. Then Boehner leans back in his chair, says, fuck Jordan, fuck Chaffetz, they're both assholes. Now, again, he was talking about Trey Gowdy actually taking a position in the House Oversight Committee, which the other guys, Chaffetz, when he was there, Chaffetz, of course, left later on because he couldn't handle, defending Trump, and he went straight to Fox News. Very interesting. Now, the other guy, Jordan, well, he means Jim Jordan, right? Now, Jim Jordan is one of the founders of the Freedom Caucus, and the Freedom Caucus is incredibly conservative. They're actually one of the groups that stopped repeal and replace because, not because it was terrible, it's because it wasn't terrible enough. They wanted it to be even more right-wing. They wanted it to punish poor people even more. So that guy was apparently also a huge thorn in John Boehner's side. In fact, he said, quote, Jordan was a terrorist as a legislator going back to his days in the Ohio House and Senate. A terrorist. A legislative terrorist. Damn, dude. That is super strong criticism. But it's actually very accurate because, well, we all know what terrorists do, right? They blow stuff up. In this case, Jim Jordan blows up legislation. Now, look, one example, and this is an older example. This is when President Obama was trying to do a budget deal, right? And he's like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to let you cut Social Security. We're going to go to a changed CPI, right? That's an effective cut in the growth of Social Security benefits. We're going to offer that up right on the table so we can do a budget deal. Do you agree? And the Republicans are like, no, it doesn't cut enough. It doesn't cut food stamps enough. It doesn't cut Social Security enough, doesn't cut Medicare enough, doesn't eliminate Medicaid, can't take it. So these people actively blew up that legislation, that chance for them to get what they wanted, which works out great for us because no cuts in Social Security. But for them, it was a disaster. But now, of course, unfortunately, as the Republicans are now getting more extreme, a lot of the so-called moderates are leaving. Now there's going to be more consensus on horrific legislation. So that's the bad, that's going to be very, very bad. Watch out for the impact on that. But, it's funny, thinking back to that time, you realize that back when Boehner's in charge, he was considered far right. That guy was a crazy conservative ideologue. But compared to these new guys, he actually seems reasonable. That's insane. The Overton window has gone so far to the right that now we're like looking at John Boehner and going, we miss having someone reasonable. Disaster. Now, here's another interesting piece of this interview that's also kind of insane. Now, apparently, John Boehner had a little bit of a run-in with Don Young from Alaska. He said Young had pinned Boehner against a wall inside the House chamber and held a 10-inch knife to his throat. Oh, that's wonderful. Boehner says he stared Young in the eyes and said, "Fuck you." Young says this account is mostly true, but notes that the two had become good friends, with Boehner later serving as his best man. Now, wait a minute, that is fucked up. Like, that's a super fucked up thing to do. To go, "Oh yeah? I'm gonna hold a knife to your throat." It's even more fucked up that they end up being like, "We're now buddies." That's a way to start a friendship. It's like, "Hey, yeah, you know what, Bob? He once held a gun to the back of my head. He was going to blow my head off. But now we grill together every weekend and go bowling. Yeah, Bob's a super great guy." That's crazy. That's crazy. Like, this is like the start of a lot of right-wing friendships. Like, yeah, you know, we were punching, kicking the shit out of each other, and it turns out he's kind of a cool guy, so we decided we were going to hang out. Weird. Super weird. But anyway, Boehner gets into the problems with the super far right of the Republican Party and media, and I found this actually very interesting. Here's some context first. The rising influence of Heritage and other outside groups in the far right, for example, Club for Growth, Freedom Works, the Tea Party Patriots, made the speaker's job infinitely harder. Egged on by an angry GOP base, they repeatedly corner Republicans into fights they couldn't possibly win. Now, these outside groups, they pay a lot of right-wing radio hosts to gin up that anger, because that anger drives people to the polls every time. Now, Boehner addressed that by saying, quote, "It was modern-day media and social media that kept pushing people further right and further left. People started to figure out that they could choose where they get their news. And so what do people do? They choose places they agree with, therefore reinforcing the divide. Places like, in this case, Fox News with Sean Hannity, of course, or you also have Rush Limbaugh as well." Now, Boehner, interestingly enough, says, "I always liked him, Limbaugh. Quote, when I went to Palm Beach, I would always meet with Rush, and we'd go play golf. But you know, who was that right-wing guy? Mark Levin? That guy, he went really crazy right and got a big audience. And he dragged Sean Hannity to the dark side. He dragged Rush to the dark side. I heard they have cookies. I'm just saying. Of course, Rush Limbaugh, the last thing he needs is a cookie, but I'm not saying anything. Boehner said he used to talk to the two, quote, all the time. And suddenly now, they're beating the living shit out of me. Well, look, that's what happens when you follow the money. See, these, and it goes back to what he was saying before. These gigantic right-wing think tanks that are funded by people like the Koch brothers and all these different right-wing billionaires, the Mercers, which are super, super far to the right, they'll go and they'll pay these hosts to say whatever they want them to say. And these radio hosts, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, are like, ooh, give me the money. What do I gotta say? Oh, do I gotta say that, you know, that Sandra Fluke is a whore? Okay, I'll say that. Sure, no problem. I gotta talk about these crazy conspiracies? Yeah, okay, yeah, sure. Well, I'll talk about that. Just give me the money. Where's the money? Give it to me. Give it to me. That's what they're all about. They don't believe their own bullshit. They're saying what they're paid to say. And of course, they get paid to have these incredibly right-wing positions, to criticize anybody who even dares to reach out to a Democrat, to do anything. And here's what we have. I mean, this is definitely part of why the right is so far gone at this point. The other part is, of course, the Democrats keep on chasing them. The Democrats keep on reaching out just to get their hands slapped back in their face. And then, lo and behold, the corporate Democrats will go and adopt right-wing positions in the hopes of compromise and centrism, because that's what they believe in. And that's, of course, an incredibly flawed ideology, because the center, there is no center that's defined. It keeps getting redefined every time the right moves even further right and every time the left decides that they want to chase after him. Now the Democrats are no longer the left. They're center-right, and they've been a center-right party, I think, since the days of Bill Clinton. So, but anyway, now Boehner continues, and he talks about Hannity here. He said, I had a conversation with Hannity probably about the beginning of 2015. I called him and said, listen, you're nuts. We had this really blunt conversation. Things were then better for a few months, and then it got back to being the same old, because I wasn't going to be a right-wing idiot. Now, of course, Hannity did not take that line down, did not take that well. And he said, John, were you sober when you said this? That conversation never happened. I'm sorry you are bitter and you failed. First of all, I love the dig at him being sober. Because, yeah, look, John Boehner definitely had a drinking problem. Come on. But then again, if you were working in that job, I think a lot of people would probably develop a drinking habit, just to be fair. But look, as far as being bitter, I don't know if he's bitter. I actually think for the most part, Boehner's really happy to be out of there, even though, yes, he was essentially pushed out. I guess, you know, when you're in the speaker's chair, when you hold the speaker's gavel, a lot of people are gunning for you because they want your position. Now, for me, I'd be like, why would you want that position? That's horrible. That's a shit ton of responsibility, and you get blamed for everything that goes wrong, even if it's not your fault. So, yeah, if I were in that position, I would have been like, no, fuck you. I'm going to go drink and smoke on my own. Fuck you guys. I would hate that job. And just look at Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan also probably hates that job. But anyway, I love this interview because, look, I think there's a certain freedom that you get as soon as you leave Congress. For one, you no longer have to bow to the donors. That's a bonus. And you also have to stop pretending that you get along with some of these people. Where you can actually call people assholes and be like, you know what? That person sucks. Freedom, man. I love it. I mean, look at all the people who are no longer running for office. You've got Flake, Corker, and McCain, right? They don't give any fucks anymore. They're out of here. They're actually being honest about how they feel. Now, that doesn't mean I agree with their positions at all. Their positions are still incredibly monstrous. But it's sort of like a breath of fresh air, hearing these politicians actually be honest for once. Again, we're used to our politicians lying to us all the time. That, like, when you actually hear somebody saying how they feel about somebody or something or a piece of legislation, you're like, oh my God, finally, you're actually speaking like a human being. Again, Boehner, don't agree with any of his positions, but the fact that he seems like a moderate now, it kind of shows you again how far to the right we've really gotten. And at least he realizes that in this interview, and it's just too bad that he didn't actually speak out at all when he was in a position of power. But of course, the main reason for that is, as it's always been, money and re-election. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.